Cambridge is a wonderful city in which to live. I'm petrified of the idea of driving or even riding a bicycle here. So I've been walking everywhere, and that allows me to take time to look in shop windows, actually to talk to people on the streets, most of whom will talk back, to experience some of the pubs that are around and the wonderful restaurants, to watch people on the river, to look at other tourists coming through and thinking, I'm not a tourist, I really live here. I would love the idea of being able to come back here. Cambridge has become, in a sense, a second home. Experiences at the Wolf Institute have been fabulous on a variety of levels. On the one hand, I had the excellent library facilities here at Cambridge that I had expected, superb conversations with members of the staff, with the students in the program, with faculty members as well. But there have also been numerous surprises, from the range of depth and interest that the students brought, to people from the community who came to some of the programs and asked questions that I had never considered. Particularly helpful for me has been being part of the context of being in England rather than in the United States, and having a number of my American presuppositions challenged. Jewish-Christian relations work is always contextual. It takes shape based on the people who are participating and the cultural forms that shape those people. So issues in the United States are different than what one would find in Great Britain or in South Africa or Australia or Germany. In the United States, a lot of issues are based in United States politics, particularly around the role of U.S. support for the State of Israel. A lot of Jewish-Christian relations work in the United States is primarily sponsored by the Roman Catholic Church, and not so much by the Episcopal Communion, related here to the Anglican Communion. So what I found in Cambridge is the opportunity of being able to talk with people who formally represent the Church of England to see what they think, to work with British Methodists on their statement regarding Christian Zionism and support for the State of Israel, as well as Palestinian rights, to work with people at Westcott House, Anglican ordinands, people training to be ordained in the Anglican Communion, and have the opportunity to talk with them about their particular issues. Driving a substantial amount of Jewish-Christian relations discussion today has to be the crisis in the Middle East, with issues of support for the State of Israel theologically as well as politically or economically, questions of Palestinian rights, questions of the divine promise to the land, issues of how one can be neighbor to both Israeli and Palestinian. How does one even have a conversation here, particularly in Jewish-Christian relations where the Jewish Bible and the New Testament don't quite say the same things about the land, where we don't have the same liturgical focus on the land, we don't have the same training of our children in terms of a Zionist emphasis. So the Middle East is one principal part. Another part of Jewish-Christian relations that remains extraordinarily important is the idea of biblical studies. What does it mean to share a common set of scriptures, whether it's the Psalms or Isaiah or Genesis, and yet read those scriptures so differently? How do we hear through each other's ears? How do we see through each other's eyes? And finally, we have questions about how we image the divine as a trinity, as a singularity, as transcendent, as immanent. What is our prayer life like? What is our liturgy like? And what, in fact, can we learn from each other? Finally, the intractable question: how do we learn to agree to disagree? Jewish-Christian relations can never be static. It always changes because the people who participate in it always change. New voices come in, new ideas come in, people from new cultures enter the discussion. And moreover, for people who have engaged in Jewish-Christian relations more than once or over the years, we change as well. Because as we learn to understand our neighbors better, as we delve more deeply into our own tradition, We think new thoughts, we perceive new things. Sometimes we challenge old opinions, sometimes we throw those old opinions away. So I found personally as well as internationally, whenever Jewish-Christian relations is discussed, the terms always change. The extent to which the Israeli-Palestinian conflict impacts my teaching, whether it's my teaching at a university or my teaching in a church or a synagogue, very much depends upon the particular occasion as well as the particular audience with whom I am working. So that if there's a specific crisis in the Middle East, a Gaza flotilla, a terrorist bombing, now the move on the part of members of the Palestinian Authority to petition for statehood from the United Nations, those particular political moments tend to drive the conversation. But increasingly, it becomes part of what I think we ought to discuss. As Jews and Christians, we are necessarily involved in Middle Eastern politics and in concern for the land. For Jews, particularly more traditional Jews, the land is part of our liturgy, it's part of our canon, and for many of us, it's hardwired into who we are. And for Christians, particularly those Christians that have fellow congregants in Ramallah or in Bethlehem, to Christians who have visited what they would call the Holy Land, there's a personal investment there as well. The trick is to figure out how to have a conversation in which sanity and concerns for justice and human rights and compassion can somehow trump very strong politics and arguments that are more driven by ideology than driven by fact. In terms of advice for those who practice dialogue, it's like those who practice the piano or you just practice. The idea is not to get it perfect, because we're never going to do that. There will always be more and more questions. The idea is not to agree on everything. The point of interfaith dialogue is not so that we agree, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and then go home. The point is to understand our neighbors in terms of their differences as well as their similarities, and ideally to challenge ourselves. For me, part of the point and part of the challenge is being able to find what's sometimes referred to as holy envy. The idea of being able to see something in my neighbor's tradition, which is not mine, but yet I can still affirm as beautiful and inspirational and somehow transcendently true. If we can find that holy envy, then at least that moment of dialogue will be a success. One of the benefits of teaching at Vanderbilt University, which is a major research university in the States, as well as living in the US where we have numerous international conferences, is I have major opportunities of being in touch with colleagues in the United Kingdom and on the continent. Being here simply makes it easier. I don't have to wait for a grand meeting once a year in a hotel. I can actually go out and have a glass of beer or a cup of tea and sit down for 2 or 3 hours with a colleague here. And one of the fabulous things about Cambridge is colleagues of mine from Sweden, from France, from Australia, from Canada. I've run into them here at Cambridge. So serendipitously, coming to Cambridge has been even more a treat than I had expected. Would I come back? Oh, sweetie, just ask me. I would be absolutely delighted to come back. I would like to think of Cambridge continuing to be a home away from home, where I can do very high-end academic work, have splendid conversations with students, have critical, engaged conversations with colleagues, and at the end of the day be able to appreciate this absolutely beautiful city.